Yay, we made it. We made it. Wow. Okay. So thanks for being here. We are live. So I'm traveling, so I'm in a different space. And I was having trouble going from Zoom to YouTube. And then there was like an error. So then I had to find out what the error is. And then luckily chat helped me, chat GPT. So I we're here, we're live. And I'm in a new space. I'm up in the mountains, actually, in the Rocky Mountains. And so what has come through, so kind of the morning transmission kind of came through. I kind of see it as it's like it just, arrives basically through presence. So welcome. And I'm glad you're here. So it was interesting coming here because it's so spacious and the mountains are so majestic. And then as soon as I came to the hotel, it's like one of those kind of Nordic hotels where there's pools, all the different hot pools. So you're going in different saunas and you're going into, plunge pools and hot pools and cold pools and steam saunas and basically that whole, and you just go from one area to the other, and then you're in the heat of the majestic mountains. And then as soon as I arrived, it started hailing. So coming from the um the province is in Vancouver is called British Columbia. So it's like coastal. So going from kind of the coastal temperature to the mountain temperature. And then as soon as I got to the hotel, I said, I was like, oh my goodness, I can't be here. Like it was so intense. And I could just feel there was so many different energies in the place. And I was so overwhelmed. It was like it hit me just like a wall, And then I just basically tuned in and I said to my higher self, like, do I have to change hotels? Like change plans? Like, what am I going to do? It was so intense. Like I just came into the hotel and, even though it's so gorgeous and it's set up, I just wanted to leave. So my higher self just said, so I have a friend that he's a shaman. So we do trades. So if he needs some kind of attunements or anything, and I can help, I will help. And then if I need help, because being a shaman is different than a seer. Like he sees things like in this lifetime, in this in this in this lifetime, basically, where as a seer, I can see kind of multi timelines. So what I was seeing was the layers and layers of this space and this place. And it hasn't been this kind of Nordic spa hotel for that long. So I was seeing, what the people were like, before it was so developed. And so he tuned in. So right away I texted him and I said, hey, if you're available, I kind of need help with some clearing. And yeah, I just got a message. So thanks, Helen, for popping into the chat. She says, hi, Elaine, working but listening, sending unconditional love. Yeah, thanks, Helen. So she's saying that she can hear, but she's kind of multitasking. So thank you for being here, Helen, and thank you for your support. So when I got to this space it hasn't happened for a long time where I was just hit with this intensity that I thought I can't clear this. I don't, it's like this is beyond me. This is massive. And so then I contacted him, I texted him, and then he got back to me right away and he said, yeah, I'd love to, because he was so curious. And he tuned in and he saw kind of what I saw, but he sees it in this time zone or this timeline. And then he just basically said, he checked in with Archangel Michael, but of only unconditional love. So he's also vets all guides very he is crystal clear, so crystal clear. And like as a shaman, and as a divine masculine that has awakened in consciousness, honor is everything. So when he says it's clear. Like he checks every corner. Like he is so thorough and he's so honest. And so we talked, so he, checked in and he kind of sent messages, and then we debriefed about it because he was so curious about, what the experience was. So as soon as I came, I, checked in, and then I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to go, because it affected my nervous system because I was just kind of flooded with all of these voices and different scenes. And so I was like, okay, well, the first thing to do always is calm your nervous system. And so I thought, okay, well, I got to go up on the roof to the hot pools and the cold pools and the hot, cold plunging and all the steam and all of that. Um, and and then see how it feels. And then, of course, it was so majestic and so amazing up there. And then I came back to the room, and it didn't feel, um, it just felt overwhelming, and I didn't know what to do with it. Like, am I supposed to clear? Am I supposed to witness? Am I supposed to, like, what, And so he came to the same conclusion, which is they're here. They're kind of like in between spaces. They're kind of lost, but we're just meant to kind of leave them as they are. And then I had tuned into, there was somebody out front. So this is, energy work. So it's not, real life. So it's not like he's not a real man in the parking lot. But what I saw was that there was an injustice. And so he is stuck in this time place because of the injustice, and he has been stuck for 300 years. So when I talked to him, he was very upset about the injustice. So I'm just going to send lots of hearts. And so this happens with light workers. So sensitives, empaths, star seeds, black sheep, don't feel like you can connect with anybody, are all kind of under the umbrella of light workers. So he so the energy that I was seeing was this person, and it was from 300 years ago. And so he's been basically, stuck. And so he's First Nations. And so he was surprised, I could see him and hear him, And so I just said, well, listen, I'm here. I can see you, and you're stuck. And so why not, you don't know when you're going to see someone else. Like, it's been 300 years, and, you don't know if you're going to find somebody else that can come and talk to you. And I said, why don't you let it go, and just surrender to source, like release it all to source. And he said, no, because it's an injustice. He was harmed, and he died, and it was an injustice, and he was caught off guard, and he was in his kind of soul, so his higher self was able to always see like spirit. So, the divine mother, the eternal mother, the divine spirit is the feminine. So he always was able to communicate with spirit. And so he's First Nations, and he felt that, why didn't she speak to him? Why didn't she warn him? Why didn't she let him, why did she let this happen? And so, we talked, and it was interesting because I was on, with my friend that's a shaman. And then I had, the energetic being, not in this life, not in this, he's formless. So this other person I'm speaking to is formless. So it's energy work. And so we were both curious to see, how he felt about this conversation. So I basically was saying that for light workers that are in service to source, in service to the divine spirit, divine presence, God's source, divine presence, that we do feel ripped off, because if we die in a way that is unjust, that we're caught off guard, and that help didn't come in the moment, we're stuck, you know? Like I was stuck for 4 lifetimes because of the injustice that happens in 3D, and kind of trapped in that confusion. And so, and thanks for the hearts. I'm going to send some hearts back. So it looks like Sinija has joined as well. So good morning, everyone. Headache, just woke up, still in bed. All right. So sending you lots of love, lots of unconditional love. We'll get your higher self on the healing. So the discussion was kind of with 3 of us. So I'm on the phone, and then he's, my friend, he's checking in on the energy. And then we both were curious to see, like I said to the person that died 300 years ago, I said, I'm going to light a candle and I'm going to put it in the window, like in service to you, but just focus on the source golden light, and then just see if you can let go, if you can surrender, if you can surrender this injustice. And he said he wasn't ready. He's been stuck for 300 years and he wasn't ready. And I said, in order to get justice, the way I understand it, the only way to get justice is to let go. And it is the hardest thing for light workers, myself included, to do. And my friend that's a shaman, he said it for him as well. It is the most, because the ego comes in, so we talked about how the ego interferes, and how the ego, wants to be top dog. The ego is very much like, you can't do this. And it's like the ego wants to be the boss, right? Of consciousness, of source consciousness. And so that's what I basically said to the spirit of this First Nations person. I said, I'm not from this land. It's a different province. I'm not from this land, and I'm not First Nations, but I'm just talking soul to soul, basically, higher self to higher self. And so I just said to him that is something all of us, like, source is, so when we release it to source, then source is the one that brings the justice, not as a earthly being, but in that cosmic law. Like, we can't just go around harming other people and nothing happens. It may seem like that in the 3D material plane because it happens for a long time. Like the dark ages, we've had a few dark ages on 3D Earth, and they're very dark. It's like very intense fear, lots of trauma, lots of disgusting things happen. And that's shifting now, because also, Mother Earth, the new Earth, Gaia, is also done. But it is like a dark age. It is the dark ages, when so much harm happens and there's no respect. There's no respect for Mother Earth. There's no respect for Gaia. There's no respect for other beings, that you just, people just do whatever they want to children. They do whatever they want to other people, and there's no respect. But from a source consciousness perspective, source, it's always respect to respect. Unconditional love to unconditional love, like it is mirrored. And so I'm told in sessions all the time, because this comes up, with light workers all the time, this getting stuck because it feels impossible to surrender, because the injustice feels difficult to release. And so if um if yeah, it's interesting. So the guy, my friend that's the shaman, he just texted and he just said, okay, he knows I'm doing a YouTube live. So he just said, it all looks good. And he checked in on this space again because he does it by remote viewing. So he's really good at that, where I do that as a seer, but as a seer, I can see all of the layers, you know? So it's like a lot of information. And then I have to like, and that's why I always ask, for your first name and your year of birth and your pronouns so we can zone in on this life, like zone in on this human being life. So he said the song that he felt would be a really good song to play. And then like he's so thorough, and then he gives me like the link. So it's Oh, Ave Maria. Yeah, Ave Maria. So that's Mother Mary. So Miriam. So calling in Miriam. And actually what I did play, it is one of my favorite songs. Like I do not speak Aramaic. I don't understand Aramaic, but I listened to the Lord's Prayer. So this is not religious work. So I listened to the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic once, uh, uh, like last year, and I just started crying because it just hit me fully in my heart, like a remembering. And so that was the song. When I set my alarm this morning, that was the song that comes up. And so it's interesting, like we have different styles, but he basically got the same message. So he said the song that came to him was to listen to Ave Maria. And then for me, it was the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic. So it's like he's in a different province, but we're tuning into the same space. And he's also, he's interested in the guy that is stuck, for 300 years, the man, because he knows he knows how hard surrendering is in this life in a 3D body. And he really understands as well that right now it's all about presence, connecting in through the heart into the inner body. And I said to him how I see the the ego, the conscious mind. I see it as an installation. Like, he's a tech person as well. So I just said, I see it as like malware. Like it's like an infection in the transmission channel. Like, they got confused, the controllers or the architects that took over the 3D material plane, they got confused and they thought they were God like creators. And so then what they created was tech. And that's, really where they focused on trying to turn our like 3D bodies, our source bodies into tech machines, and then also the banking and then all of the rest, right? So all of the tech. But they're missing the consciousness, they're missing presence, they're missing the divine, they're missing source consciousness because they're 1%. So they're so far removed from source, like from their own free will choices. But at this point, they're so far away. And then the grays actually, they destroyed themselves because they went fully into tech. And now they're trying to do like, genetics and kind of steal 3D body genetics to see if they can kind of save, themselves or whatever, but it's not working, that they are a collective, but they'll probably, my guess is they are in a desperate state because they know they're going to be extinct because they need so much energy from us, like emanated source light beings, They need so much energy from us, and there is not enough, because everybody's waking up and everybody's claiming their energy, they're claiming their bodies, they're connecting to source consciousness, they're connecting to their hearts, they're connecting to their inner body. They know they're here as light workers to awaken, and they're not just giving their consent, and they're not just letting whatever happens happen. So they're asking, everybody's asking questions now. And then as soon as you start asking questions, then you're just getting an awakening after an awakening and after an awakening, which is, of course, then your consciousness is activating. And that's basically 5D. 5D is a heart-based consciousness. It's quite a high consciousness. It's like 500 on the Dr. Hawkins scale. And then now it's embodying 5D. So that's the kind of the work that we're doing in these sessions. It's like how to, now we are in 5D, but then how to embody 5D in the body. And no matter what is happening on the outside, being able to maintain your consciousness and being able to maintain that 5D frequency. So it's all about surrendering. It's not, but when you're surrendering, you're not saying all of this gross stuff that happens in 3D is okay. That is not what surrender is. You're saying you're naming the gross stuff, and you're saying, I release it to source because I want it from a cosmic source justice. I don't want it from a human 3D material plane justice. I want it from a higher source, so which is source or God, source, divine presence. So, because 3D earth justice is tit for tat, you stole from me, I steal from you. Like that's how we've been taught karma is. It's like tit for tat. It's like you do something, I do something back to you, and then you roll along like tumbleweeds, and you go on this path over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And you do the same thing over and over and over again, and you're fighting with the same people, right? It doesn't work. Like there's no consciousness, there's no higher consciousness involved, because you're acting kind of like the judge and the jury, and then you're, kind of getting into, you're getting involved with people that like, let them go. If there's no consciousness and there's no respect and there's no love, there's no reverence, then don't be around them. I'm not telling anybody what to do, but that's essentially it. Like you don't have to, even if they're the mother, the brother, the husband, the whatever, or whoever it is that you're entangled with, if there is no respect, there's nothing you can do. Like you can't teach anybody. You can't show anybody, this is what unconditional love is. This is what love is. They have to choose consciousness for themselves. And consciousness on 3D is chosen. Period. So, okay. So yeah, so that's where we're at. But you can kind of see the synchronicities, like my shaman friend, like, he just texted while we're doing the live, and then he had the same idea where there's a song that came through for him to play, and then I had played a song. So we were both the answer to all of, like I called it the carnage of this hotel, like lots has happened in this hotel because this has changed hands. And it's like how to clear the energy. And then both of us came to the same conclusion of sound frequency. And he even gave me, of course, he's like so thorough. He like gave me the link of like the song that, so that I can find, it was this particular song called Ave Maria. So that's like with Mother Mary, which is Miriam. Her spiritual name is Miriam. She's a seraphim. So seraphims are here as total devotion to source. They are 100% in service and devotion to source. So, and also, but they're also very fiery, so they, they take on these big jobs. So, okay, let's take a look at the chat again. Okay, so I think when Helen wrote, wow, it was when we both got the same song, and he texted me during the live. And then we both got the same idea of playing the sound, like the to clear the area with sound frequency, which is really powerful. Okay, so then oh, and then Sanija has a question, and then Sanija saying an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Right, that's the expression. I always get expressions kind of wrong. So thanks, Sanija. But it's like amazing because Sanija always like has the answer for, details like, yeah, so it's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And that has been 3D. 3D has always been like, well, you don't need sources justice when you have like the human justice, and they want us fighting each other, and they want us in opposition of each other, and they want us to waste all of our time not awakening in this 3D body. They want us, fighting and kind of being confused with like the same, it's like tumbleweeds. That's what it looks like. It's just tumbleweeds, like tumbling with the same people, and the same scenarios go on and on for decades, and nothing shifts. That's what 3D looks like. Okay, so Sanija has a question. Okay, so let's take a look. Sanija, she, her, 1973. Did X relationship decree yesterday at 12:49 a.m. Wow. You're That's late. Okay, so the emotions of heaviness and loneliness overwhelmed me. Yeah. And then Sinija said, yeah. So then her next comment was eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. So thank you, Sinija. And then Sinija says, well, I'm just going to send hearts for doing the relationship decree. It's an intense decree. And it was posted, the X relationship decree is part 11. And then it was posted on the 16th of May, 2026. So, and that's really essentially the tumbleweeds, like you're tumbling with the same people over and over and over, and it can be lifetimes, right? So for me, I was trapped in a cycle. I call them the handlers. There were 4 handlers, and I was stuck in a loop with them for 4 lifetimes because they want you to be stuck. So they don't want you to unhook, basically. But anyways, if I did it, anyone can do it. Like seriously, anyone can do it. So, and then Sunija says, yes, it's hard to forgive and let go because it seems that they get away with it while we are held accountable, picked on, and blamed. Yeah, exactly. Because, you can always tell who between the dark triad and the light worker or the empath or the sensitive, it's all under the umbrella of a light worker. It looks like the video looks a bit delayed at moments, but I'm just going to claim the Wi-Fi and source's name, and then just claim this YouTube live and source's name, and then claim Zoom and source's name. So I've already done this before I start the lives, but it's always good to do it again. And then if I notice any lags in the Wi-Fi, then it's always a good reminder to do it again. So, and that's exactly it. And the person that is stuck, that he's in the parking lot. I mean, it wasn't, 300 years ago when he was here, it wasn't a parking lot. But it was basically that he has been stuck in this place, this in-between place for 300 years because he wants justice, because he was caught off guard. And then where was spirit? Why did spirit not help him? When he communicates with spirit all the time, and why didn't spirit come through and help him? And it was a senseless, petty theft kind of death. It was a death. He considered it as a death of not honor. Like it wasn't an honorable death. He was caught off guard. It was a petty kind of theft situation, and he was killed. So, and then he's stuck. So it's like we're having this conversation. So, it's energy work. I don't think I see people. I see real, human beings, but this is energy work, and I can see in the ether. So I can see in multiple timelines. And so could you, if you choose it, anybody can. I've awakened my senses, and I trust myself, and I trust my heart. I trust my body, and I trust the information that I'm receiving. I have received it all my life. Like I've always seen people or their beings that are stuck, and I've always told them, this is this time, and you're stuck, and kind of what do you want to do? So but Sinija at the same time, so doing the relationship decree, because the thing is with the Anunnaki controlling from 3D from 4D is they place what I call the monitors or the wranglers or they're like monitoring people. But they're in the physical 3D. They have physical 3D bodies, but they are our husbands, wives, mother, father, brother, sister, cousins, and they cause a lot of harm, but they're also in the most intimate relationships, because of course if they're going to infiltrate and control you, they need to be in your closest environment. So if you had a narcissistic parent or you had a narcissistic siblings, like I had one client and she said, I feel with my older brother that I was in a domestic violence situation growing up. And that is the dark triad, you know, and they're there to cause harm so that you don't awaken, so that you kind of give up and you kind of collapse because you're so overwhelmed and you're so confused. Why would my mom be so jealous of me? Why would my mom want to cause harm? Why does the mother favor one child over the other or children over the other children, and create all of this triangulation? It's very typical of the dark triad, the psychopath, sociopath, narcissist. But, in order to heal, we have to name things as they are, not the way we want them to be. Like I always thought, well, if you just love people more, that really everybody wants love. And if you love people more, then they will evolve or the relationship will change. And then you just get decimated because they don't care about love. They care about lying, cheating, and stealing. And they want you at your lowest because that is the highest loosh. So if you're terrified, it is the highest loosh. Love, they cannot extract love because it's too high of a vibration. So if they are at 1% and then, or let's say 1% is like 10, like 10 on a scale, and then the heart is 500 and then source is 1000. So if they are at 10, they need you, which is the lying, cheating, stealing, fear, trauma. They need you to be at fear and trauma all the time, right? And then your home base is the heart. And so you're constantly trying to activate to stay stable at 500. Like all light workers automatically to go to 500. Like even with the friend that helped me, with the space here in this hotel, honor is everything. And no one taught him. Like he's like, honor is everything. And in service to God, source, divine presence is like to him, his essence. Like there's no way he would ever deviate from that, and no one taught him that. He knows it from him, like his higher self. He knows it for himself. So, um, so they need us to be at the lowest frequency, which is that fear and trauma, shame. And so then, of course, the people closest to us are what I call Archon entangled. They're actually called handlers or monitoring spirits, not spirit in terms of the good spirit, but in terms of, they call them monitoring spirits, or they call them handlers is kind of like the right word. And so you think, well, they're my mom, they're my brother, they're my husband, they're my wife, they're my friend, they're my best friend, you know, and you think they're your friends, but then everything is off, you know, like when you tell them, you know, your heartbreak or your heartache, and then they use it against you, you know, and or they say the opposite and then they cause more harm. So they learn kind of what hurts you and then they do it more. And you're like, in it for decades. And because there's this dissonance, it's like, but it's my husband, it's my wife, it's my mother, it's my father, it's my sibling, it's my cousin, it's my friend, it's my best friend. And you're like, it doesn't make sense. There's like a dissonance. And then you have to just call in, maybe this is another expression that Sunija can correct, but what's coming through is you have to call a spade a spade. So an awakening is actually calling things as they are, not how you want them to be. Right? So if we're married to someone, we want it to be a loving relationship. But if it is a monitoring relationship that is designed to keep you at a low vibration and to create loosh, then, you know, no matter how long you're going to be with that person, that is the essence of the connection and the relationship. But you didn't marry somebody to have that dynamic. And, you know, with the love bombing, you didn't see it because they were fine while you were dating. They were fine while they were courting you, you know, and then as soon as you got married and as soon as you have children, you know, basically all bets are off. And then they reveal, the mask comes off and they reveal who they are because they don't think they need to try anymore because they have you where they want you. They have you trapped, or they think they have you trapped. But, you know, if you're connected to your heart space, to source, and you're communicating to source all the time, well, you know, those controllers aren't in control. Like what I see is if you are communicating to God, source, divine presence all the time, and then source, you know, God, source, divine presence is communicating through you and then through the compass of the inner body. So your body is responding to things. And then the more you're communicating with, you know, God, source, divine presence, and then the more your body's getting activated, the controllers or the handlers start losing control. And then that's what they don't want. Right. So it is all about control. So, and I have to say, you know, I know, and I'm very sorry, Sunija, but it is so typical, you know, to be decimated in personal relationships as light workers. It's what I used to think it was rare. It is the norm. They need a massive amount of loosh from us as light workers, as empaths, and we do not need them. We actually need to stay away from them and identify them and stay away from them, but it is a free will choice. So earth is free will, and so you have to choose and decide for yourself. So yeah, so Sunija was saying that when she did the ex relationship decree, a lot of emotions came up, and the heaviness and the loneliness was very overwhelming, because when you are around the dark triad, you are incredibly lonely. It is so isolating and sad, you know, because you thought you were finding a heart match. You thought you could finally relax. You thought you could let go, like you thought, wow, this is like heaven on earth. This person's gonna love me. This person's gonna be with me. We're gonna journey together in this life. Like all that loneliness is gonna let be gone because I found my match. I found my divine counterpart. And then you find out you were tricked. It's a heartbreak. And I got some 100%, and I'm thinking that was from Sunija. I'm going to send you some love, some hearts back. But, and then you find out, no, it was a trap. And then you got to get out of the trap, and then if children are involved, it is a heartbreak, because 3D has no respect for the children, like none, no respect for the children. So, and then, yeah, so then Sunija, so going through the chat now again, yes, it's hard to forgive and to let go because it seems they get away with everything while we're held accountable and picked on and blamed. Yeah, and isolated, right? Because they care so much about the dark triad, cares so much about their image. So say you have to go to court with them and they look, all like, I think what is the percentage is like 75% of the women that die that are trying to get away from their spouse or husband or boyfriend. And then they go to court, they try to get a restraining order. And then, they look kind of like dysregulated in court because so much has happened to them. They're being stalked and their nervous system, and they're like shaking and they're emotional and they're crying. And then it's mostly men. So let's just, like no offense to the men, but, domestic violence, the majority of the percentage is men causing the harm. So they're in male bodies, but they are the dark triad. They are Archon entangled. They are Draco reptilians usually. But they can be reptilians as well. Is they're there basically to get you to be discounted, to get your children removed from you, ultimately put them in the control of the government, so you lose your children to the government. That's their main goal. And then that Draco reptilian, the dark triad, they look all polished in court because they're not emotional. They don't have emotions. So they just look in control. They look calm. They look assertive. They're saying, you're crazy, you're hysterical, and you need help. And, your mental health, that's the big thing right now. Oh, their mental health is, off. It's like, you're living with a psychopath and your mental health is off. Like, ding dong. Wow, you guys are geniuses. It's like, no kidding, right? No kidding. You're like shaking, no kidding. You're like dysregulated because you are in a life and death situation all the time in your own home, isolated in your own home. And then the cognitive dissonance where you're like, I'm supposed to be safe here and you're not safe. And then they go to court, and then this is statistics, 75% of the women that die from domestic violence, they don't get a court order because, the man looks very calm, cool, and collected. And then, the woman dies, right? She gets murdered. And that's statistics. So that is really what happens, so she's trying to get out. She's trying to get help. And she goes to court, which is, when you're dysregulated and you're frightened, and which is so brave to do it. And then, she doesn't get the help. And I thought it was really interesting, actually. I saw a woman that is a court recorder, I think, court recorder. And she said that she sees this dynamic all the time in court, and she's just there recording it. And then she sees the same dynamic, and she says, the women, they're scared. Their nervous system is, if you are if you have an intimate relationship with the dark triad, your nervous system is like this. And that's why the decree is so powerful, because the decree removes the energetic cords so that all you have is your energy, which feels really good, you know? But we're, brainwashed, like, and I feel like it's the Hollywood brainwash where, we have been told, basically to give ourselves up, once we get married, like to give up, like to our husband, the husband has the power, and that has been a dynamic that has gone on for hundreds of years. Okay, so let's take a look at the chat. And then, so Sydney just says, Ave Maria is one of my favorite songs. Yeah, so it's a good reminder. So maybe that will help your headache, just playing that song. And you can see how we're all kind of connecting, how we're all, so I got a few 100%. But you can see how we're all connecting. So I come to this hotel and then there's this person that's stuck for 300 years, in the parking lot. Well, it's the parking lot now, but 300 years ago, it wouldn't have been a parking lot. It wouldn't have been a hotel. The hotel hasn't been here that long. So, but it all connects to everything that we're doing in this space. And sometimes you just need sound frequency to, like I think as a seer, I would have for sure in one of my timelines spoken Aramaic. And so I don't know it in this life, the language, but I know it in my heart. And as soon as the first time I heard it, I cried. And that you can't control that. Like I didn't know ahead of time that if I ever listened to Aramaic being sung, it's an ancient language, that it would touch me to my heart and I would cry, not like out of sadness, but out of just remembering. Right. And that, and then Ave Maria. So Mother Mary, Miriam is like the protector of women and children. So, um, yeah, and Sunija is saying that the sound and the video is a bit delayed. Yeah, and there's moments of it. I'm in the mountains, and so it's not a big, I'm not in a center, with internet. So I'm just amazed and glad that it worked out, because it actually took me about 15 minutes to get up and going with the tech. So thanks for being here and thanks for your patience. We know that the tech is kind of beyond what the tech is, right? It's interference. So, but what came through in the transmission is so important, because it is such a regular part of being a light worker on Earth. Yeah. And then Sunija says, the dark triad, let go and forgive easily. They see it as a game and it's fun for them. Yeah, because remember, they like, how I see them is they look gray to me. And so as soon as I said that, my throat, I can feel there's like a tension on my throat. So I'm just naming it. So they are suffering. Remember this, even if they act like they're not suffering, anyone that is not connected to their heart is suffering. So if you have so little energy that you are at 1%, and that you need to feed off pain to feel something, to get some energy, like imagine what that would be like. That would be like so disgusting. Like as light workers, that would be like our most disgusting experience ever. Like if we don't have the connection with our hearts, it's like that would be like a nightmare, a horror show. And that's their regular. And that's what has dominated the material plane for 2000 years. It's it's that basically like they've turned Earth into like, Eckhart Tolle's word is like the pain body. But we have like an internal pain body, but also 3D Earth has turned into a pain body. It feeds off pain, and it cannot go to any higher frequency than like 1%. So imagine what that would feel like, to just feed off pain. To get out of bed, you have to feed off a lot of pain to just get up and get going. Yeah, so I'm getting a couple 100%. So I'll send some hearts back. Yeah. So I mean, that's like every day they wake up and they need energy, and they're like, okay, well, where can I create pain so that I can extract that energy so that they can get up in the morning? They need pain in order to get up and do anything. And that's why, when you watch the dark triad, the psychopath, sociopath, narcissist, and they come into a room, they scan the room because they're constantly looking for loosh. They're constantly looking for energy. Like, who can I extract it from? And they spend their whole life like crocodiles. You know how crocodiles have no peripheral vision and they just like lock in, and they just watch and they just like lock. That's what they're like. If you look up, what is a crocodile like? And then that's what the dark triad are like. They're the same and they behave the same way. And they're just like trackers, and they're looking for the next energy source, but not source, but the energy to feed off of. So, and hopefully with the audio and the video being off a bit, if you do feel like watching the replay, it usually corrects itself. Like YouTube will correct it in the replay. So, yeah, so it may seem like it's a game for them, the dark triad, that it's fun for them. They do get a high if you like, they always, for light workers, we can choose to get to what they call like 0 point consciousness of neutrality, where things are neutral. And if you can be around the dark triad and your nervous system doesn't react, and you can be at 0 point neutral, and you're releasing everything to source, you're their worst nightmare. Literally their worst nightmare. Because what you're doing is in that state of neutrality, then source can step in, and it is a lot of light, and I hear this all the time where, they're, the Anunnaki do not want source consciousness putting a light and attention on them, because they need to do stuff in the darkness. But if you're at 0 point neutrality and you're naming a spade, and you're communicating to your higher self, you're communicating to source, then all of that source consciousness gets directed to them. And they do not like that. They like operating in the dark. And so if you really, 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 as a light worker, want to have the most impact, is staying at your heart consciousness, 5D, and then connecting to 0 point neutrality, and then send the person or the people to source. So as soon as you have a thought of them and something that they did to you or something that they did to your children, and you just say, no, and I send them to source. I'm asking for source's justice. I'm asking for God's justice or divine presence justice. I release them to source. And you do that
Every time that a thought pops in, something that they did or that they did with the children, and you send that person, or that though it's usually a gang, a group of people, and you send them to source every single time, and then see how things happen and shift very quickly, because they need an easy mark. And if you're connecting to source, your higher self and source consciousness, and communicating and releasing everything to source consciousness, that's a lot of light. So you don't just have your light, but you're connecting to kind of the light of all of consciousness, and you're calling it in. Like I always say, I don't want my justice. I don't want my mercy. I want source's justice. I want source's mercy. And then I would just keep sending them to source every single time. And with your children, it's like I send this, I even with your children, you can send your children to source, right? Because you want to shift this, and you want your children to align to their own hearts, because they have their own path, they have their own destiny. We're like the guardians, the stewards, but they have their own destiny. So, and the thing is with them, thinking it's a game and thinking it's fun, and I've seen this so many times in sessions, when you turn it over continually to source and you do your decree and you want it updated in the cosmic records with Thoth, Thoth, they do not like that. And I've had a client, and the part of the decree that didn't burn was updating it in the cosmic records with Thoth. They do not want that. Remember, they want to operate in the dark. And the decree exposes everything, updates the records, and you release it to source. You transmute it and you burn it, and you say, this is my biggest pain body. Relationships create the biggest pain body. Again, I can feel it in my throat. I'm releasing it to source. I want source's justice. I want source's mercy in this situation for all. And that includes me. I want my own source mercy and my own source justice, so that I can move on and I can release this. Like I want this released. I want to be released from the entanglement. And then every time, a memory pops in, you say, I release this to source. I release this person to source. I release this dynamic to source. I release my fear to source. Like sometimes the person, we're terrified of them because, when they caused harm, we were vulnerable. And also we were vulnerable because we thought that we were on the same team. We thought that we were connected, a union, a connection, a heart connection, and we were wrong. But you're not stupid. Light workers are not stupid. And so, you behaved in a way that is normal. Like in any part of, the universe and the multi-universe, the honor and respect is the baseline, and lying, cheating, and stealing is the baseline of the 3D material plane. But it is to just create and extract loosh energy, because they don't have it. So the more you release things to source, the easier your life will be. And I've seen that for myself and for many people. And so, one client, she said, anything that happens, she immediately sends it to source. And then she asks to update it in the cosmic records. Like if she feels like somebody did something and it caught her off guard, she immediately names it. We have to name it in the moment, so what is happening, you're conscious of it, and then release it to source, and then say, I want this updated with Thoth in the cosmic records. And they do not want that. And I have found that as soon as Thoth had come forward from the Egyptian timeline, and it was like a remembering, it was to remember to get it documented in the cosmic records. Because as light workers, we're cosmic free citizens and we're cosmic workers, basically. So we're working with multiple timelines and dimensions. But this body and this earth body and this time frame is the most important. So the present moment and the present time is always the most important, but it usually will be a reflection of what has happened in other time spaces. But with a body, we are able to transmute it and transform it a lot faster than in any other cosmic dimension. And that's what's, and even though Earth, 3D Earth has been taken over and it's dark, the gift of it is that we can transmute and transform. Yeah, I mean, as soon as I'm talking about this stuff, right, I can just feel it in the throat, but I'm just going to claim my seer's throat in Source's name. I'm going to claim my eyes, my seer's eyes in Source's name. I'm going to claim my ears in Source's name, my seer's ears in Source's name. So sometimes, we can drink some water, and I could have, but then I thought, no, this is about being a seer and naming things as they are. And also, as light workers, we are way showers for each other. We are mirroring for each other to learn to, what is the fast track out of the muck? How do we get out of the muck? How do we get out of the looping of these dysfunctional, horrific, relationships? They're not relationships. They're like, a trauma bond. And then Sunija said that she feels upset that our children can become like the dark triad. Yeah. And well, they call that being Archon entangled. And, because the dark triad work really hard to brainwash them. And so, and they always need to create conflict, like in a family, in a 5D family, the mother and the father, or the parent and the parent, they respect each other and they have unconditional love. And then they are the guardians of the children and they are protective of the children. And so as light workers, we think that is the norm. And then, we're basically tricked on 3D Earth because they need you, like he needs you to have children with. Like they can't have children to get, the dark triad can't have children with the dark triad. They need a light worker. They need an empath. They need a sensitive. So they need a heart-based source, heart-based emanated being. And so every time, even with your children, just keep sending your children to source, asking for an awakening, asking for a healing, like I need this healed. I need, because it's horrific when it's like your own children and you can see that they're not okay. And so, we can fight also in court and legally, but we can also clear things very fast energetically and through the decree. And then, you can, if it comes up and it's really intense, like for me, if there were situations where, somebody did something and I would be like, my nervous system would be shaking, I would do a decree. And then and then sometimes you have to do it twice and then name, try to name exactly what the fright is, like what has frightened you, what is really, what's frightening you? What is causing that deep fright? And then name it and then do the decree. And then the decree updates it in the cosmic records, and they don't like that. They do not like having this documented in the cosmic records, because in the Egyptian timeline, and the Egyptian timeline has lasted, the pyramids have lasted, and Anubis and Amput, they, with the with justice, it was called Maat, M-A-A-T, and it was like the scale of justice. And so on one side of this scale was weighed, and then the other side was a feather. And so your heart is measured, and your heart is measured. And so, we don't have to get involved in other people's karma, because nothing, and I see this so many times in all my sessions, is no one gets away with anything. And it's hard to believe that everything is documented in cosmic records, but no one gets away with anything. And that's why now we're seeing, they have to disclose what they've been doing, because they've been relying on inferred consent. And inferred consent is not consent, and children cannot consent, So what they've been doing to children, and they do not have children's consent, because children cannot consent. So, but that's why they have to disclose what they've done publicly, and it cannot stay secret. And now the lies, have short legs, basically. So before, they were getting away with things for hundreds of years, thousands of years, like 2,000 years. But now it's happening at a rapid speed, especially in the next 2 years. There'll be lots of disclosure of, kind of what has been happening. And yeah. Yeah. So, whew, take a deep breath. Always get back to the heart, connecting into the heart, connecting to the inner body. And then Sunija says, thank you, Elaine. And then hearts, two pink hearts and a yellow heart. So thank you, Sunija. I will send hearts back. And then Sunija says, I had to flash the ashes from the X decree more than 3 times, as if the ashes particles were peeling off on and on. Yeah, exactly. And that's how stubborn they are. Like when I did the relationship decree, it was the same thing. I had to burn it more than 3 times. And when I went to flush it in the toilet, I made sure, and then I even, with a pot, I put water in the pot 3 times and flushed it 3 times, and there still was an ash in the toilet. After all of that flushing, after all of that, so they're very stubborn, because they know once you have it updated and you release it, then it goes to source, and then source takes care of everything. And it's not like source takes care of everything like in the human way, like source comes with like Archangel Michael and then they go and attack. It's not like that. It is a energetic, like when you release energetically, that stored energy of that trauma bond is released to source, and then that energy has to go somewhere, but that energy came from someone. Is think of it like a hot potato. The dark triad have a hot potato, and then they want the light worker to collect the hot potatoes. But when you release it to source, the hot potatoes go to source, and then source goes and looks at who originally sent the hot potatoes. Because, it came from somewhere, that energy came from somewhere, and source follows energy. But, like the hot potato, they want to dump it on you so that you are responsible, or you take the hot potato. But when you release it, and you release it in the decree, you're releasing the hot potato, back to source, which then goes back to sender. Because that's how energy works. Our energy will always return to us. Everything we send out will be returned to us. So hopefully that helps. Think of it that way. They're giving, the dark triad is giving you all these hot potatoes, and you're like, very conscientious. Light workers are like, okay, well, let me see if I can transmute it. Let me see if I can heal this. Let me see if I can help. All that stuff. Right. And it's like, okay, that's codependency. Let that all go, you know, and then release it to source. And then you're here to awaken if you choose, and then match with other heart-based beings. And that's what is happening now. So it's like even in these lives, with Sunija and Helen being here, right? Like, we are connecting heart to heart, light worker to light worker, heart-based beings to heart-based beings. And there's a resonance, there's a soul connection, there's a heart connection. We understand each other's language. What we're speaking of is we are understanding each other. Finally, we're not alone. And that's what the intention of this YouTube live is that, we're not alone and isolated. That there are other light workers, other heart-based beings that have been isolated the way we've been isolated and have experienced these horrific things. But it all can be healed and transmuted and transformed. But we just need to recognize it, basically name it, and then release it. And the decree releases it on an energetic level, updates the records, but you are also calling in your support team of unconditional love. And then we're releasing it through fire to source. And you're releasing the entanglements, because you don't want anyone siphoning your energy, because you need your energy. You need to get up in the morning. You need to get out of bed, and you need your own energy. And all they can do is leak your energy so that you become sick. But they actually, they can't steal your energy, and you can't, even if you wanted to. Like, I would have a million times given people, if I could give energy to the dark triad for them to stop being the dark triad, I would have done it a million times, but we cannot. It's a different frequency, and they have to choose if they want to be heart-based beings, which they can if they want to. Then they have to choose it for themselves. So yeah, it's really interesting. So we're up in the mountains. We're up in the Rocky Mountains. And so the internet, like, thanks for your patience with technology. It can be interesting to see, when we see the playback, it usually works out just fine. So Sinija says, yeah, and so good for you, Sinija, for persevering, right? Like, you flush the ashes and you flush them 3 times, and that new ash particles kept coming off, and then but you persevered, and you're like, no, this is done. Like, my decree stands, because they want you to not cut energetic cords. They want to stay entangled. Remember, they need your energy, but you don't need them, and they are depleting you. So, and if they like it or not, it doesn't matter. It's your choice, your body, this is your energy. Your energy is yours. Between you, like, for me, I always see my energy is between me and God, source, divine presence. And so my direct relationship is God, source, divine presence, and then back. And then everybody else is like an extra, not like an extra person, but like extra connection. But my main connection is, source to source, God to God, divine presence to divine presence. Yeah. Whew. Where are we at? Yeah, so this one is a really good, it's a really good live because it is, yeah, I saw a little bit of a flash of a light there. This is a really good live because it is exactly what light workers, the main pain body of light workers. So yeah. Whew. Take a deep breath. But you can see, like, even with my throat, at certain points when I felt like I was going to cough and I did cough and I felt like my throat was closing, it's always important to notice what was I talking about when that happened? Because I call those the hot spots. Because once we name them in the decree, they are basically in the cosmic records. It is not an edited video, it is a live stream, and it is going live into the consciousness, the collective consciousness. So, and that's what's so powerful of us meeting together in the lives, is that we are connecting to the heart frequency, the God source divine presence frequency. So good job persevering, Sunija. Thank you, Helen, for being here and listening. But I think let's end the live now. It seems like the chat has gotten, we're getting some light flares coming through the room, which is really cool. I'm going to send some hearts. And yeah, thanks for being here. This is, it feels like an exciting live, but a sad live, because we're dealing with justice, and the injustice of the 3D material plane and the helplessness of the injustice. But the decrees can help with the justice and then also with releasing to the root cause, to the very first incarnation, to stop the looping, and also to get the archon entangled people away from you so that you can energetically, heal and rest, basically, and start actually living your purpose, like, what you're meant to be here. And so the next decree is coming out on the 30th of May. Oh no, the next one, okay, part 12 is actually something new. So it's a surprise, but it's lighthearted, and it is from the heart, and it's called the Manifesting Decree, and it will be out on the 23rd of May, 2026. And that is part 12. And then part 13 will be coming out on the 30th of May, 2026, to wrap up May. And it is the Lightworkers Fear Decree. So Sunija and Helen have both asked for that. And then the transmission kind of came through of how to do that. And then that will be for the 30th of May. Oh, and then remember, it's just like, one piece of paper. Right? We don't want to write a book. We just want, like, the highlights. And then, well, thank you so much. Let's end the live now. And, hi from the Rocky Mountains. And we'll see you in the next one. See you next Tuesday. And thank you for your comments. And thank you for writing in the chat, and your feedback, and especially for your love and for your commitment, as we have these conversations that are not so easy. And today's conversation is about justice, and it wasn't so easy, but listen to, if you feel called, listen to the song Ave Maria. And I'm going to go up to the roof of the hotel and then go in the Nordic spa. So I'll be like, I feel like it's like releasing everything that's been entangled in the lymphatic system. and my nervous system. And it's like a releasing, a flushing away. And I didn't even plan on coming here. And then I was here, and then I arrived and I was like, what am I doing here? And then I went up to the spa and the different pools and the steams and all, like the different steams, the hot steam, the steam, like the saunas. And they have that whole setup, and it's so peaceful. There's no phones allowed. And there's it's like it's quiet, and it's the mountains are stunning, and it's sunny. So when I first arrived in Alberta yesterday, it was hailing. And now it's sunny. So yeah, I kind of feel like it is a washing away, it is a clearing, and that our nervous system can be reset. We can ask source to reset our nervous system, from our frights. We can ask, source or God, source, divine presence, can you reset my nervous system? Can you reset my lymphatic system? Because that is really where it's targeted. And so, yeah, enjoy your day, and lots of love to everybody, and see you in the next one. And I so appreciate that you're here. Lots of love. And always, take what resonates and leave the rest. Be the boss of your energy, and let me know how it goes. All right. Thank you. Yeah. And Sunija says, enjoy the mountain air and enjoy the spa. Thank you, Sunija. And thank you to Helen for also being in the chat. And then everybody that's here that didn't kind of go on the chat, but that are here. Thank you for being here. All right. See you in the next one.